Welcome everyone. Today my speaker is Dr. Sarah Adeyinka-Skold, who's going to be speaking with us about Black folks dating in the United States. And she's a sociologist. Dr. Skold, can you tell us a little bit about you and the work that you do?
Yeah, so I'm a professor of sociology at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina. And my work really from when I was in college until now has really been looking at interpersonal relationships, primarily romantic relationships, to see how the maintenance of them and the creation of them really reveal inequalities in US society. So for me, I'm focused primarily on gender and racial inequalities that come up and are revealed as women primarily are getting into romantic relationships. And I should add that I'm looking primarily at heterosexual women. I'm not looking at LGBTQ plus women. And I think we actually need to do a lot more work, including myself, on LGBTQ plus folks and the kind of barriers they are facing and the inequalities that come up for them as they are forming relationships.
Yeah. So cisgendered heterosexual women mostly. So you and I talked about this. I'm going to read a little something that I wrote and then a question for you. I know we're supposed to be speaking today about dating, and I also want to acknowledge and contextualize something. Yesterday, Breonna Taylor's murderers were not properly convicted because only one of the 3 police officers in the case was indicted on a different charge, which was not murder. So none of the 3 officers, white officers, were indicted for murder. While on some level it doesn't necessarily feel directly attached to the issue of being a Black man or woman and dating in the United States, on the other hand, in like the big picture, it seems like it's related to the fact that there are far too many Black people, particularly Black men, imprisoned, and the constant threat of violence that is especially felt for Black people and other people of color too, but especially for Black people living in this country. And I guess I imagine that that must trickle down and affect other things in everyday life, like dating. And I wondered if you could, before we get started on some of the other questions that I had for you, I wondered if you could speak to that for us for a moment.
Yes, so this issue is important because for Black people in the US, the personal is political, right? They are the ones that came up with that saying. They recognize that every law, every rhetoric, every structural decision that was made for and against them was about their lives. So there's no way that we can divorce Breonna Taylor's murder from the life that Black people are living in general. And I think this is really important because one of the last papers that I wrote was looking at kind of the issues that spur women of color, especially Black women, to want to date Black men. And it's issues like this. It's hard, it's harder and harder and harder to find non-Black people who don't understand police brutality. People say things, you see it on Twitter, Facebook, well, if you just follow the law, you wouldn't be killed. If you just follow the law, you wouldn't go to prison. But then there are countless videos that show white people not following the law, that show countless white people being armed, fighting with police, running around chasing police naked, and live to tell the tale. In fact, you find videos of folks who have entire trucks full of guns, live to tell the tale. So for Black people, these moments are important, and a lot of times we love our allies, but the reality of living in a Black body that is constantly under threat of violence and wanting to find a partner who understands that reality and lives it themselves cannot be underestimated. And so for a lot of women of color, especially Black women who are dating in the Trump era, they've decided that that is not something that they can compromise. They cannot compromise being with somebody who doesn't understand what their life is right now, who doesn't understand that at any moment their life may be snuffed out, who doesn't understand that we're living in an administration that is promoting white militia and white supremacists to literally take the lives of innocent Black people as they protest systemic racism. That's where we are right now. So I think for Black people, being with a Black partner has always been about racial survival. It's never been about racial power the way that it might be for white folks, or, oh, I want to have something in common. No, it's about surviving a system that literally has a target on your back. And that's hard to do alone. So why not do it with someone who deeply understands your life? So I think this all matters for Black people, especially when everywhere you turn, people are making excuses for police brutality. People are making excuses for a man who crossed state lines and shot protesters. People are making excuses for white supremacists. If this is the life that you're living in, you can't take your partnership for granted. And I'm not saying all Black people feel that way, but I wouldn't be surprised if Black people were really we're really now in a place where this is super important to their romantic lives, and finding partners who understand this is important to their partner preferences.
Yeah. Thank you so much for like really framing and contextualizing that for us, because I feel like I think it's so easy for people to sort of not see the connection, and I don't know, just to me it feels like they're really connected, and sort of, but explaining that feels really challenging. Tell us a little bit, I want to switch gears a little bit and hear a little bit more about some of your other work. Can you tell us a little bit about some dating trends that you see amongst Black men and Black women in dating in the US?
Yeah, so my work focuses primarily on Black women, because I'm a Black woman, but also Black women they're at the bottom of the racial hierarchy, right? If we start seeing problems in our society, we start seeing it with Black women first, because usually they're bearing the brunt of whatever structural issue is at hand. So my work is mostly on Black women. And what I've really studied is the barriers to relationships, to forming relationships that Black women have. And we see this all the time, right? So, and amongst college educated women. So typically, when we're looking at this data, you see that Black women in general are the least likely to get married, but college educated women are more likely to get married than their non-college educated counterparts. But we have to compare apples to apples. What about college educated white women? What about college educated Asian women? So oftentimes you'll see these comparisons and people want to dismiss Black college educated women's experiences, because they're like, well, at least you're getting married more often than non-college educated Black women. But I think that dismissal is ignorant.
So it leaves out a whole chunk of the population.
Exactly. And I think it also means that somehow your class location subsumes your racial location. And we know that that's not true. Middle class Black people have all the same worries. Maybe they might have more resources to be able to address the constraints that they face, but they certainly have very similar racial constraints that Black non-college educated folks have. So for me, I really looked at this data that shows that Black college educated women are not getting the returns to their sort of college education in terms of marriage that non-Black women are getting. And I'm wondering why. And a lot of the rhetoric that comes out has to do with, well, Black women are intimidating. Black women only want to marry Black men. Black women are picky. Black college educated women are not open-minded enough. And as usual, Black college educated women are blamed for things that are structural issues, right? So that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at their micro experiences in order to reveal these structural issues that are barriers or constraints in their romantic partner search.
Yeah, I wonder about, as a sociologist, like what changes or maybe lack of changes, I don't know, have you kind of seen over time in Black women in dating in terms of these stereotypes, like you just mentioned? Are there other ones um, that come up that have changed or again, maybe not changed,
Yeah.
maybe strengthened? I don't know.
I mean, one thing that has changed is that Black women are marrying more interracially.
Mhm.
So, but it's obviously not at the rates that Black men are marrying interracially, and it's definitely not at the rates that Latina and Asian women are marrying interracially. So we do see Black women getting married. So that's good. And I'm not saying that marriage is like the pinnacle. I think that it's a personal choice, and if you choose not to do it, that's good for you, because I think there are plenty of pros that come from being single and being your own person. Um, I do also believe that Black women are starting to believe less that is something wrong with them.
Yeah.
There's something, at least I'm hopeful that that's what's happening. But I think that there's a lot more work out there that's showing them that it's not them. They aren't the problem.
Yeah.
Right. And as we, even in this political climate, we see these out and about white supremacists. We see these people who are criminalizing Black people, who are criminalizing Black Lives Matter. So I think that Black women are starting to get more of the sense that, like, I'm not sure the problem is us.
Yeah, I would say you have a background in social work, and I was thinking it's so easy when we're and anyone's in a negative place to internalize some of that stuff and blame oneself.
Mhm.
And I'm hearing you say like one maybe positive thing that's happening right now is Black women are less internalizing that message that it's my fault.
Yeah. And I hope that is the case. I mean, it doesn't make it any easier,
Yeah.
because when you see your counterparts getting married, um, or you see people have more choices in terms of partners than you do, or
Mhm.
you see the constraints in front of you, sometimes no matter how much you understand that you're not the issue, it does not necessarily overcome the sadness and the grief that comes from not participating in something that you really want to participate in. So I don't want to downplay the fact that, like, these structural issues have real emotional consequences for Black women. My hope is that they will continue to see that they're not the issues, and they're not the issue, and find ways to empower themselves, but also find ways to sit in the pain and grief that is not disempowering to them.
Yeah.
So sometimes the beauty of sociology, I think, is that we can pinpoint issues to the structure, but we don't always have the tools to help people to overcome, like, the emotional work they have to do to continue to live a productive life, irregardless of these structures that are impacting them.
Yeah.
So I don't want to dismiss that reality, because some days it is really going to feel like it's your fault, and there's nothing you can do about that. You
Yeah.
just survive, right? Like, we think about Breonna Taylor, people are still saying, well, her boyfriend had a gun. If he hadn't had a gun, then she wouldn't have gotten shot.
Mm.
They don't seem to think about the fact that she was sleeping in her bed.
Yeah.
They don't seem to think about the fact that, like, she's an autonomous individual,
Mhm.
right? There are plenty of white men that have guns, but we don't blame their wives or their partners for what happens to them. But when it's a Black person, suddenly they're just responsible for everyone in their life, including themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really important for Black women to recognize that their pain, their hurt, their grief, their sadness around romantic relationships and loneliness are real. And they should continue to engage in things that make them feel like they're enough.
Yeah.
Because
It's so much for anyone to have heaped on their
exactly.
shoulders.
And we don't know that these things are going to get better. If anything, it looks like it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
So as usual, Black people have to find their own resilience. They have to find their own joy because it's not coming from the society.
Yeah. Yeah. So that kind of goes into my next couple of questions, which are like, what can society do to change some of these issues? And that includes, you know, everybody, right? Because that's what it takes to make societal change. But also, what are some things that Black women in particular who are in the dating scene, what can they do? So maybe you could speak to both of those things, maybe societal and then individual things.
Yeah. So I'm going to be frank. People just need to stop voting for white supremacists. And it's not hard to spot a white supremacist. Like, we think, oh, you're calling this person racist, you're calling that person racist. We're not in a point now. I think we're moving from a place of color blindness where people used to do sort of covert racism.
Mm-hmm.
There's data that shows that in the places where Donald Trump won handedly, hate crimes against ethno-racial minorities went up.
Mm-hmm.
So if you truly believe that all people are equal, like really equal in every sense of the word, not 3/5 human, like our Constitution calls Black people, then you really need to stop voting for folks who create policies that dehumanize others.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's really something simple that you can do. I don't know.
Well, and not just at the national, right? Not just at the federal level, right? At all levels.
Every level.
In your local elections, right?
The second thing that folks can do is, everyone has some sort of privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Some, right? I'm a Black woman, but I'm also an upwardly mobile Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
So my social location is middle class. I can advocate for people that are not college educated, do not have the same income. I might not be able to speak to racism. I might not embody a white body, so there are certain things that I can't say, or I might say them and they fall on deaf ears. But you bring something to the table. If you're straight, that's a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
So really thinking about, like, where am I embedded in this society, and how can I use the privilege that I get from that embeddedness to advocate for others,
Mm-hmm.
through voting, through organizing, through calling out racist people in your family, through calling out classist people in your family, homophobic, transphobic. Use your voice. And again, these things aren't easy, but getting a society where we truly believe we're all equal and acting that way is not easy. People have died,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, that's what has happened as a result. So we have to be willing to make those sacrifices, as difficult as they may be.
Yeah.
I think for Black women, I think they just have to keep doing any kind of work, building any kind of relationship that makes them feel as though they're enough.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that's all I have for them. There's already so much that Black women are doing in this world to make it a better place. It's not lost on me that the woman who called out the hysterectomies
Mm-hmm.
was a Black woman.
Yep.
Right? The people that are out here on these front lines, the women that founded BLM, those people are Black women.
Mm-hmm.
So Black women already are doing a lot of work to humanize people that are seen as not fully human, while they themselves continue to deal with that dehumanization.
Mm-hmm.
And we have an administration now that is fully engaged in stripping them of the power to do that. This CRT, critical race theory, these, banning of federal dollars for racial and equity training, guess who's at the forefront of that work? Mm-hmm. Guess who's doing the work to make sure that we are a society that lives up to its ideals? It's Black women. Mm-hmm. So the only thing I want Black women to do is continue to find ways that show you every day that you are enough, that you could look in that mirror every day and say that you're enough, even if it doesn't feel like it, even if the world around you is saying you're not enough. That's it. That's all you have to do. And for every Black woman, that's going to be different. I don't believe it's going to be the same thing, but that's all I'm asking them to do, because literally literally, like, Black women continually saved the US. If it was in wherever, Georgia, Alabama, they showed up to vote for Doug Jones. We have people on Twitter still telling Black women that they need to save us from Donald Trump, when white women are really the ones that brought us into that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, do whatever it takes for you to feel that you are enough. You don't owe anyone anything else other than that.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we had also talked about that I thought was really interesting, when we spoke previously, was this idea that online dating for Black women, which, let's just put out there, during this pandemic is a whole big heap of a mess anyway, because there's not really a whole lot of other ways to date right now very effectively. But that online dating for Black women versus white women, or even women of other races, is very different. And I wondered if you could just talk about that briefly.
Yeah, so from what I've studied, what is clear and plain to me is that white women are the only group of women that are facing exclusion in their dating. So they're excluded by both Black and non-Black men. Mm-hmm. You don't see that with white women, you don't see it with Asian women, and you don't see it with Latinas. Mm-hmm. So Black men often use the same stereotypes, the same tropes that non-Black women do, in terms of excluding Black women. Oh, they're intimidating. Oh, they are emasculating. Oh, they're loud. Those kinds of things. Non-Black men are using those kinds of, that same rhetoric as well. So Black women, whereas Asian and Latinas can always count on men of their races to date them. They don't have to worry about men of their races excluding them in any way. And it's true, women of color are accepted sort of on the condition of interracial dating, oftentimes as a condition of being fetishized. Mm-hmm. So that happens to Black women as well. But at the same time, they are also excluded in ways that non-Black women are not excluded. And this is a totally different reality for white women. White women are not getting any comments about their whiteness. They're not getting any comments about, being exotic. It might be here or there, but I didn't see anything systematic about it. Right. But they would even offer up examples of how their Latina and Asian friends were exoticized, or how their Black friends were excluded. And the reality of knowing that if they were not white women, they may be having those very same experiences. Mm-hmm. But Black women are in this unique position in where they're literally facing exclusion from men of their race and men outside of their race. So it really is like a miracle when Black women are married, and yeah, I'm gonna stop there. Maybe not a miracle, but it's not an easy path for everybody. Mm-hmm. And online is a place that often magnifies sexism and racism that we see out in the world.
Mm-hmm. So getting out there and trying to do a little bit more in-person dating, as challenging as that may be, and for a whole host of other reasons, seems like a really important thing for Black women in particular to try and do.
I mean, they can certainly try and do it. I think it sounds terrible, but at least with online dating, who's checking for you and who's not, because people are very frank about it.
Sure.
In-person dating, I think bears its own risk, right? Yeah. It's not popular to come out and be like, well, I don't date Black women if a Black woman is talking to you. So I don't know that it's better. If Black women want to do that instead, they can. Mm-hmm. But that has its own challenges that are, again, unique. Yeah. To Black women.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, that feels important. Yeah. Dr. Adeyinka-Skold, thank you so much for speaking with us today about this. And again, particularly in the context of the lack of charges for Breonna Taylor's murderers. Where can people who are interested in reading more about you or hearing more about you or connecting with you a little bit more about your work, where can people find you?
Ooh, that's a good question, because I'm still working on my website. I'm on Twitter. My handle is at Lovieskold, and that's LOVIESKOLD. If you go to my profile and scroll through, you'll see links to my articles that have come out. I'm also on LinkedIn, so you can find me there as well. Those are the two places I would say to look for my work, and you can send me messages on either platform if you are looking to read what I have written.
Excellent. Thank you so much again.
No problem.